In today's video, I'm going to be doing a tutorial on how to play the G major Minuet, which is number 116, written by Johann Sebastian Bach. Now, I have a video already out on my channel of the performance of this piece, so if you're not familiar with this piece, you just kind of want to remind yourself of how the piece goes if you want to learn it. Go and check out that video, because if you like the piece and you like how it sounds, that video will give you an idea of whether or not you actually want to learn this piece. This video is not going to be about performing the piece, so this video is not going to give you a good idea of what the piece actually sounds like at all, because I'm going to be playing it really slowly, and instead of playing the piece for you, I'm going to be showing you the sheet music, showing you the fingering, and then also showing you the keys and showing you exactly what notes to put your fingers on and what fingers to use on the right notes. So hopefully you enjoy this. Let me first off start off by showing you the sheet music, and I'm just kind of walk you through it, quickly go through the sheet music, show you anything that might be a little bit challenging or anything unusual that I want to discuss later on in the video. And then after I show you what the sheet music looks like, then I will also show you the keys, and then I will start playing the piece and showing you exactly how to play it. So let's do that. So here is the sheet music for the Minuet we're going to be looking at today. As you can see here, the title, of course, says Minuet, and then underneath that it says a study in the arpeggio of the common chord. And I've never really seen anyone refer to chords as being common like that before, but I imagine what that means is probably something like the major chord or maybe the root position chord, because we are in the key of G, as is indicated by the 1 F sharp there. That indicates we are in the key of G. And if we look here at the notes here in the first measure, we have G, we have B, and we have D, and then that note on top is G. And then after that we have A and F sharp. And those are all notes from the G major scale, and in fact the first four are simply, actually the first three are just the G major triad, and then the fourth note is just a G added on top of that, which I suppose is the common chord, the root position chord. Whatever common chord necessarily means, that is what I assume the arpeggio here is talking about. That's what common chord means. So basically, as you can see, the piece does revolve around the arpeggio of the G major chord. So that is one thing that kind of makes this piece really fun to play, actually, because you kind of bounce around the keys, and it's just a lot of fun to play. Now, everything here in the first line is pretty straightforward. It's just all simple notes. It's really rather easy. When we get to here, some of the fingering in this piece I found was a little bit optional, if you will. It's kind of seemed like the editor kind of made the fingering a little bit more challenging than it needed to be. And while you can do the fingering here, and there's nothing wrong with it, as you can see, we have 5 on the first E, then we have 4 on the second E, and then we have 3 on the third E. You don't have to do that first 5. You can simply play a 4 there, then do a second 4, and then change the third E to your third finger. The first 5 there, what I found was a little bit unnecessary, and it actually made the piece just a little bit more challenging to play, which could add a fun challenge to the piece. But if you found it uncomfortable, or you just found it completely unnecessary and annoying, you could simply change that first 5 to a 4 with no ill effects. Now, this music here is actually like over 100 years old. I think it comes from like 1850, and at some point in the past someone has drawn in some lines here showing what the left hand notes connect to in the right hand, and I really have no idea how old those lines are. I didn't write them in. Someone could have written those in 1930. I really have no idea how old those are, but that's just kind of something cool. Someone in the past has written that, as well as a little check mark there. It seems that somebody in the past was studying out of this book, and either they or their teacher wrote little check marks, and there's one on the other page there as well, little check marks on the pieces that they successfully have passed. So as you can see, the previous owner of this book wrote down here that this C lines up with this E in the right hand, and then also there as well. On the sheet music, they don't really line up, but rhythmically they do, so that's just something they wrote in to aid themselves. So the first line there, as I showed you, is pretty straightforward, aside from the little fingering that I said was kind of optional. So let me show you the second and third lines here of the piece now. So now let's take a look at the second and third line of the piece. You could have seen the second line in the previous camera shot, but I wanted to move the camera down a bit so we can get the third line in here as well. Now, if we take a look here at the second line of the music, we'll see that it's actually pretty similar to the first line, which you can't see anymore, but if you remember what it looks like, it looks really similar. Now, down here, and in fact this second line is really pretty straightforward. In these few measures here, we have some fingering that, once again, is a little bit optional, if you will. We do have some fingering that the original editor wrote in, but I didn't really like it. You could use it, and there's nothing really wrong with it, but I found some fingering that made the piece a little bit easier to play. And again, various editions of the piece will most likely have different fingering, as well as tempo markings and all of that kind of stuff, because the original piece is very old, and over history, many people will have put their own little twist on it. So I'll show you the little twist I put on it. If you like my fingering, go ahead and use it. If you like the fingering I'm showing you here in the music, go ahead and use that. And if you have your own version of the sheet music that has something completely different, feel free to use that. If any of those are more comfortable for you, just go ahead and use whatever is the most comfortable for you, as long as it doesn't make something else in the piece inconvenient. If it doesn't affect the playability of the piece and it actually makes it easier for you to play a certain fingering, just go ahead and do that. Now, this second to last measure here in this second line contains something that might be a little bit challenging for some of you if you've never encountered this before, and this is a group of eighth note triplets. And so I'll show you how this works rhythmically when I get down to the keyboard, but essentially the way it works and the way you can identify triplets is, as you can see, we have 3 eighth notes in the place of where a single quarter note would be, and we also have a 3 underneath of that group of notes. Now, in the previous measure, we have a group of 4 eighth notes, and if I just block off this one so it looks like there's only a group of 3, as you can see, it looks just like that group of triplets does, but there's no 3 underneath of it. The way you can identify triplets is 2 reasons. One, the group of notes will be in the space of where a single note can be, as in here we have a single quarter note in this spot, but here we have 3 triplets, and also you have a 3 underneath the note. So I'll show you how triplets work. They're actually quite simple, and at this speed this piece is supposed to be played at, they're a lot of fun. But even if you can't play this piece at the full speed, that's totally fine. Play at whatever speed is comfortable for you, and have fun playing the triplets, because they're actually pretty enjoyable. Now, the second line here is also rather straightforward, but we do have an accidental. As you can see, we have a D sharp that is not in the original key signature. So everywhere there's going to be a D sharp, the music has notated it. There's one here. There's none in this measure, but there is one here as well. And I thought there were a couple other ones. Yeah, there's a couple right down here at the end of the line. And we also have another group of triplets right here, which is going to work exactly like these, except with some different notes and with a slightly different pattern in the left hand. That third line there is pretty straightforward, so let's move on to the last 2 lines, and I'll show you everything that's going on there. So here are the last 2 lines of the piece, and I just wanted to kind of walk you through these as well. Now, one thing I didn't mention earlier in the piece is the presence of dynamics. Now, when Bach would have been performing these pieces, or really anyone at that time would have been playing pieces on a keyboard instrument, they wouldn't have had real dynamics. Now, organs at the time would have had various stops that can kind of reproduce dynamics, but these pieces were meant to be played on a clavichord, which is kind of a predecessor of the piano, and that had no dynamic control whatsoever. So as you can see here, we have a P, which means play piano or play soft. We've got a crescendo here, and then we also have forte here on the last line. Now, if you don't feel like doing those, you really don't have to. They do add a lot of expression to the piece, but again, the dynamics in Baroque times were really non-existent aside from on organs, so on a clavichord there wouldn't have been any dynamics, and these dynamics would have been added in at some point later in history by an editor, perhaps the one who edited this version of the sheet music. Now, in this section here of the sheet music, we also have some more fingering in the left hand that I believe I changed. I didn't write anything on the sheet music, I just kind of remembered it in my mind, but I will show you what I played there instead of what is written on the sheet music, because I made it just a little bit easier to play. Again, what is here on the sheet music works just fine, but I found something that I personally preferred a little bit better than what was written on the sheet music, so I'll show you that as well as what the original sheet music says. Again, the fingering is going to differ between many different versions, so just use whatever is most comfortable. We've got a fun little part here where we go back and forth between 2 notes over and over again, and then a different set of 2 notes over and over again for a whole measure. That part's pretty fun to play. And then we just kind of go on here. And the last line of the piece here is actually identical to, I believe, the second line of the piece. I'm comparing them right now, and in fact, they look exactly identical aside from the fact that there's no triplet here in this last measure. So if you didn't like playing the triplets, well, looky here, there's no triplet in the last measure here, so you won't have to do one. But if you enjoyed playing the triplets, well, I'm sorry, there's no triplet in the last line of the piece. But I suppose if you wanted to, you could add one in. It just wouldn't be correct to the sheet music. It's just fun to play. But instead of having a triplet, we now have a group of 2 eighth notes instead of a triplet, so that will be something to watch out for and something to remember when you're playing the end of the piece. You'll have to remember, don't play a triplet here, just play that group of 2 eighth notes. But I think that's about everything I wanted to mention on the sheet music here. Again, we have lots of slurs, and in this last measure we have a few staccato notes as well as in the rest of the piece. Now, when you're first learning the piece, you're first looking at it, you're first figuring out what the notes are, you'd probably just want to ignore all that for now, as well as the dynamics. But when you get better at playing the piece, when you can play it through at a nice, even, consistent speed, maybe, I don't really know how fast speed would be comfortable for you, because I don't personally know you and how well you're doing on the piece, but whatever speed is comfortable for you, once you get to playing this piece at a comfortable speed, you can just kind of start adding in the slurs, the legato notes, as well as the staccato notes into the piece, and you can do that at your leisure. So now let me show you the keys, and I will start educating you on how the piece is supposed to be played, show you exactly what fingers are supposed to be played on exactly what notes, and how all that works. So here we are down at the keyboard. So what I'm going to do is, like I said, I'm going to walk you through the piece and show you every single note to play with every single finger step by step. I'm going to talk about the fingerings that I changed ever so slightly to make the piece a little bit easier for me. If you like that, you can do that, and if you want to do something different, you can go ahead and do it. But one thing I wanted to get out of the way before we get started with the piece is where middle C is on the piano, because with the camera angle we've got a really wide range here. This is the bottom note of the piece, and this is the top note of the piece. So we had to kind of raise the camera up a bit, and as a result, we can't see the logo, and we can't see where middle C is. So a great way to figure out where middle C is on the piano is, as a general rule, and I can't really think of where this would not be applicable unless you're playing on a keyboard and there's no logo in the center, is on a piano, the logo is generally in the center of the fallboard, and on this piano, the start of the logo is here, that's where the first letter is, and the last letter is here. And so that's where the logo is, and as you can see, there's a C right here, and that C is middle C. Now the C below it, you can kind of tell by the sound, that's not middle C, it's too low, and the C above middle C, you can tell by the sound, is it's too high. And after a while, you'll get used to the sound of middle C and the notes that surround middle C. That was a very strange fingering for a very strange scale, but you can kind of get an idea of the sound of this zone around middle C, and then when you sit down to a piano, you'll kind of know where to go. Now, the high C up here also kind of falls under the logo. This is the last letter of the logo, and this is where high C is, but middle C is here kind of within the confines of the logo. So that's just one way you can tell where middle C is. And the main reason I wanted to get that out of the way before we get started is the first note of the piece in the right hand is the G above middle C, that top note I played in that strange scale I played just a minute ago. So if we go to middle C, the G above it is here, and that's where we want to play the first note in the right hand, but we want to do so with our thumb instead of my second finger like I did just then. So what I'm going to do is the first note to play in the piece is G, with our thumb, just like that, in both hands. So in the right hand, we want to hold, well, in the left hand, we want to hold that G as we play some notes in the right hand. So what we want to do is, again, play those Gs together. Then we want to go up to B in the right hand with our second finger. We want to go up to D. We're going to go up to G, just like so. And then as we play D in the left hand, we want to jump down to an A. Go up to an F sharp. And then this is the start of the next measure. So let's play through that first measure to give you an idea of how it sounds. Just like that. So it's really quite simple. The left hand rhythm is very simple, and the right hand is very straight, very simple, and very easy to play. As you can see there, it was based around a G major triad because we have G, we have B, and we have D, and then on top of that we also had a G. And that, essentially, those first three notes are the G major triad, which is drawn from the G major scale. And the other two notes that were in that measure were A and F sharp, which also comes from the G major scale. So this piece, of course, is in G major, which I already discussed because of the key signature of the piece. Now the second measure of this piece right here has G up on top here, which we ended off on, and then we also have a low G right down here, which we want to play together at the same time. This is the second measure of the piece now. Then we want to do, in the left hand, fourth finger. Then we want to do G and D. We want to go up to G, come back down to G as we play this D. We want to play B again with our fourth finger, and then we want to play the first note of the next measure, which is just that. Now I'm going to play that second measure there through for you just to give you an idea of how that sounds. Every time we play D, we want to play that G in the right hand, so that's one way to kind of keep track of how that rhythm works, just like this. The next measure here is very similar to the first measure of the piece, except for we play slightly different notes in the left hand. We play low G here as we play this G in the right hand. We do that same rhythm and melody in the right hand, like this. But then here on this A, we go up to D. Same D as before, but we go up to it because we're playing the G below it this time. We go up to F sharp at the last note of that measure, and then the first note of the next measure is this, just like before. So that third measure here of the piece sounds like this. Then the first note of the next measure sounds like this. And it's actually the same as that second measure we already talked about. Same notes, same rhythm, same everything. I'm just going to go over that because we already talked about that. So let's move on to the fifth measure here in the piece, which actually gets a little bit different. And this is also where I changed the fingering slightly from what the sheet music originally said, just to make it a little bit easier to play. Now what my sheet music says is to play E with our pinky as we play C in the left hand with our middle finger. Then we want to change to E with our fourth finger. Then we want to play E with our third finger so we can go up to this G. and that's the end of that fifth measure. Now what I did is, because you don't have to play E with that pinky, there's no real reason to do it other than the fact that we were here on G, and technically reaching to E is a little bit easier than reaching to E with our fourth finger. But in the previous measure, we went down from G like this. And if you kind of leave your hand in that open position to play the next few notes of that measure, from the beginning of that previous measure, like this, look where my fourth finger is. It's right on that E. So instead of moving to my pinky, I can just play E with my fourth finger. Just like that. And then play it again, and then move to E with our third finger, so we can get to that G. Now again, either way to play that is pretty optional. You can do the 5-4-3 method, like this, or you can play 4-4-3. Either way, I think is totally fine. If your version of the sheet music says something different for some reason and you like that more, just go ahead and play whatever is most comfortable for you. I just kind of thought doing 4-4-3 was a little bit easier, particularly considering where we just came from and our fourth finger was kind of already there on that E to begin with. So let's play that measure with the 4-4-3 pattern in the right hand and then continue on to the next measure. Now we want to play a similar rhythm and melody in the right hand, but instead of playing 4-4-3, we just want to play 2. We want to play 2 again. Then we want to play 2 on D again, as we play B in the left hand, and then we jump up to G once again. From here we want to play A in the left hand with our pinky as we play C kind of with our thumb in the right hand. Then we want to go to D in the right hand with our fourth finger as we play F sharp with our second finger. Just like so. We want to go down to C, then we want to play G and B, just like that. Then we want to play C with our third finger, and then go down to A with our thumb as we play D in the left hand. And the left hand pattern here is 3 notes repeated twice. Just right up the G major scale, play F sharp, go back down to D, play it again. And now we're ready to move on to the second line of the piece. So let's hear the first line of the piece played all the way through at a nice slow speed to give you an idea of how the piece sounds so far. Oops, didn't play that note for some reason. That one note there, I pushed it and it didn't sound for some reason, but that is what the whole first line there of that piece sounds like. So let's move on to the second line. So the first measure of the second line is actually exactly the same as the first measure of the first line, and in fact the first 4 measures of the second line here are exactly the same as the first 4 of the first line, which is a really great thing about this piece. Some of it repeats, and in fact the first 4 measures of the very last line in the piece, actually the entire last line of the piece, as I showed you in the sheet music, is very similar to the second line of the piece, aside from the end of that line where we don't play that triplet. So the second line of the piece here goes like this. Again, the first 4 measures are exactly the same as the first 4 of the first line, so I'm just going to play over those. We've already talked about what to do here. So when we come to something different, I'll explain what to do here, and we do so here. This, in my version, is the fifth line of the second line, fifth measure of the second line. And what we want to do is now play 5 on E as we play C with our middle finger here. Then we want to go down to D in the right hand, and we want to play E with our left hand, just like so. Then we want to play G and B, just like that. We want to move our finger to D once again as we play B in the left hand. And this measure is one of those where I kind of change the finger again in the left hand. We want to play C with our fourth finger as we play D with our middle finger. We'll go down to that. Then we want to play A with our second finger as we play G with our thumb. Let's move on to the next measure here, and then we want to play the triplet starting off with our middle finger as we play C with our fourth finger. Then we want to play D with our thumb on the second beat. We want to play F sharp and D just like that, and then we want to play G. The last measure of the piece is really simple. We just play G, D, and G as we play G in the right hand like this. And that's on beats 1, 2, and 3. Real simple, and from here you could repeat back to the beginning of the piece and play through those first 2 lines. But before we move on to anything else, I wanted to talk about a couple of things, and one of those is the rhythm of the triplet. So the triplet, in its current state here in this piece, is a really rather simple rhythm. Now, triplets can get a bit more advanced when you remove some notes from triplets and start chaining groups of triplets together. Rhythms can get a bit more complicated, but in this piece, the rhythm of the triplet is really rather simple, and we're seeing it in its simplest form. We have a group of 3 eighth note triplets on a single beat, and I have my metronome here to demonstrate for you how the rhythm of the triplet works. So if we put the metronome here at the speed of 60 beats per minute, and we play that triplet measure, I'm just going to play it through a few times, we can hear how the rhythm of the triplet works. Like that. We play 3 notes in the duration of 1 click. Now in this case, I've set the metronome and I'm playing it so that each click corresponds to a quarter note or 1 beat of the measure. And as you can hear, those 3 notes fall in between the space where we have 1 click, and then I'm done playing those notes and I'm ready to move on to the next note by the time the second clip rolls around. Just a couple more times, just to give you a demonstration here. I just wanted to play that last measure there so you could just kind of get an idea of how that line would end. But that's how the rhythm of the triplet works, and in this case, it's a really rather simple rhythm. Now you can practice it along with the metronome here. I have it set to 60. I think that's a pretty good speed to practice that at. If you wanted to go slower, you could. If you wanted to go faster, you could as well. But you can just kind of play that and just kind of play the rhythm of the triplet over and over again in that measure, even just with the right hand if you wanted to. Just kind of get the feel for how that feels under the fingers and how it sounds in the ears. And even if you wanted to, now this is kind of optional, and I don't know if this would really help a lot of people, but if you were having trouble with kind of feeling the triplet rhythm, you could just play those 3 triplet notes over and over again, making sure to play the first one on the click of each metronome click, and then the other 2 would fall in between the clicks, like this. That's the rhythm of a triplet by itself, and maybe that would help some of you, maybe it wouldn't, but I just wanted to kind of show you what a triplet sounds like continuously with all triplets. Once again, that measure, and the last measure of the second line. So now let's put the metronome away, and I want to just kind of show you what I changed in the fingering. Once again, it's a little bit subtle. I'm going to start again on the 5th measure of the second line here, and we start off just with the normal fingering of the piece. We want to play 5 on E and 3 on C. Like so. We want to go down the scale. Now here, the fingering, if you remember, had pinky on this B in the left hand, and then we did B, D, and G. Now what I changed is we don't need to go to that pinky for any real reason. That is, when you're practicing inversions, 5, 3, and 1 is the normal finger you'd want to use if you wanted to practice inversions in the left hand. As you can see, 5, 3, and 1. But in this case, we don't need to play 5, 3, and 1. We could simply play 4, 2, and 1, which is another way sometimes you will be playing chords in music. And the reason I wanted to do that is because mostly it's just you don't have to go to the 5 and 3. You have to move your hand a little bit more to get to that position because we're already on 3, 2, 1. And look what my 4th finger is. It's already on that B, just like so. So I just play it. My 2nd finger kind of lines up for it. So it's a very easy way to play that measure. Again, playing 5, 3, 1, if you want to, you can do that, and there's nothing wrong with doing either way of these, but I just kind of thought that playing 4, 2, 1 here was a little bit easier, and you didn't have to move your hand as much to play that next measure. I think everything else here in this line I left the same. We could play the triplet here with your 2nd finger if you wanted to. And then in fact, actually I did change a bit more here. The next measure here, you can play the C with your 3rd finger in the left hand, and then walk up to D, and then just play the G like this. Which is the same fingering we end up with, but instead of playing 4, then 3, and then 1, you can just play 3, 2, 1, and reach up with your thumb, just because your fingers were already kind of there. And again, you can play the triplet with your 2nd finger instead of your 3rd finger because it kind of already lined up. So let me play it through with my fingering and just kind of explain it to you. 4th finger's already there in the left hand. And then as you can see, we land on that A with our 2nd finger. So on the way back up, we can just play it again, and then our 3rd finger is already on this C. So So it's just kind of, everything's already there to play. We don't have to really change our hand position. Then everything else here is pretty much the same. We jump down to D, where we play F with our second finger, or third finger, whatever you really wanted to do there. And then play the last measure. So now let's move on to the third line of the piece. The third line here of the piece starts off, and it's a bit different from what we've already talked about. This is a different section. It has a different feel and as well as a different sound, but we're still pretty much in the same key, although now we do have some accidentals. We now have D sharps to worry about for the first line of the music. The second two lines do not have any accidentals, but the first line of this next section will have some accidentals. So what we want to do is we want to start off in our right hand with G. This is the same G. It's a fifth above the middle C here, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the G we want to start off with, the same one we started the piece with. So what we want to do is play that G with our middle finger as we play this E with our thumb. Then we want to play A with our fourth finger. We want to go up to B as we play D sharp. Then we want to play A again. We want to play B with our fourth finger in the left hand as we play G. Then we want to go down to F sharp. And then we want to play in the left hand, this is the start of the next measure, we want to play E with our thumb as we play G with our middle finger in the right hand. Just like that. Then we want to play B with our second finger as we play E with our thumb, like so. That's the first two measures, and the first two measures of this next section sound like this, played nice and slow. Now, that measure there is staccato. I haven't really discussed about the notes that are supposed to be staccato and the notes that are supposed to be legato so far in the piece, because when you're first learning the piece and you're first looking at it, you don't really have to pay attention to those. You should make sure that you know that they're there and you know what all the marks mean. But when you're first looking at that music, you don't really have to worry about it. But once you can play the piece at a nice consistent tempo with the metronome or something like that, then you can start adding in the dynamics, adding in the slurs and the staccatos and legatos to kind of give it more expression and a more flowing feel, like so. So that's the first two measures of the second section here in the piece. So now what we want to do is our thumb already was just on E as we went down here. So let's go back up to E with our thumb as we play this G way up here with our pinky. Then we want to play F sharp. We want to cross our thumb over to get to G as we play E. We're going to go back up to G. We want to play B alongside this F sharp. That's the end of that third measure. And from here, we want to go to B, way down here, an octave below the one we're already playing. Then we want to play D sharp again. Then we want to play F sharp and B. We want to go up to B here. We want to play B and F sharp again. And then here we want to play D sharp with our fourth finger. And this is another part where fingering becomes very important. And it's something just kind of interesting to note about this piece. Now, when you're playing this part, it can be very tempting to simply just go up that little arpeggio and come back down with the same fingering and land on D sharp with your middle finger once again like this. But the next note we have to play in the next measure is E, which is right here. And in Baroque music, you don't slide your fingers like that like you would in blues. You'd want to use a separate finger for that note. So that's why in the fingering, it says to play that D sharp with our fourth finger. So then we can play that next note, which is E, with a separate finger, like so. And then we want to play E this is the next measure now. We want to play E with our middle finger as we play G in the right hand again. And you recognize the same right hand pattern from the measure previously. Well, the measure before the measure I just talked about, so a couple measures ago. We're going to play G and E. We want to go back up to G. We want to play B and F sharp. Just like that. And then we want to jump down to B once again and then play F sharp with our fourth finger, like so. Then we want to go to B and A, like that. We don't play it twice, I just played it again because I let go of the note and you couldn't hear the sound of it. So let's start at the beginning of that measure there. Like so. Then we want to play E with our second finger. And then we want to go up to A with our thumb. Actually, I had my second finger on that G. You're supposed to play that with your middle finger because from here, the fingering is a little bit interesting because we want to do A in the left hand with second finger, then we want to go up to B and jump down to our pinky. If you played the G there with your second finger, you'd have to cross over to B with your second finger and then jump down to the B below that, which isn't the greatest way to play that. It does work, you can do it that way, but it makes it a little bit inconvenient, and that's just one thing that you wouldn't want to change your fingering on, because playing second finger on that G like I did by accident there would make the next measure rather difficult to play. Just like that. So let me start again at the beginning of that measure. This is the third to last measure in this line. Starts off with B in the left hand and F sharp in the right hand. Then we want to go down here to A and B. Then we want to play E and G with our middle finger in the left hand. Watch out for that. Then we want to play another triplet here. I showed you this in the sheet music a minute ago, and we want to play this with our third finger as we play A with our second finger. Same rhythm there, just 3 notes in the space of 1. Then the next note we want to play is 2 Bs, just like so. We've already looked at this left hand pattern, so you'll probably recognize it from a few minutes ago. Then we want to do D sharp and B. Then from here we want to play E with our right hand as we play E in the left hand with our second finger. Then we want to go down a half step to D sharp, head up back to E, then we want to play F sharp, and that's the end of the third line of the piece. So let me play that all the way through for you, that third line of the piece. So that's what the third line of that piece sounds like at a very slow speed. Again, practicing this with the metronome will help a lot. I like that metronome speed of 60 beats per minute, but playing each quarter note on the metronome click, I find that to be a nice speed. If you found that too fast, you could slow it down, and if you were beyond that speed, you could play it a little bit faster. But you shouldn't try to play this piece faster than you can. It's always a good idea to learn these pieces nice and slow, and also with metronome played. Play it with the metronome a lot, because that really helps with your accuracy, and just it makes playing the piece at a faster tempo a lot easier. So let's move on to the second to last line of this piece. Now again, some editions will actually be different, so my second to the last line might not be the same as the second to last line of your sheet music, but in my version, which I showed you on screen, so if you don't have your own version, you could screenshot that, my second to last line starts off like this, where we play G in the right hand as we play B in the left hand. Then we want to change to fourth finger on that G. We want to play D at the same time in the left hand. We want to go down to F sharp. We want to go up to G as we play E. Now here on this E, when we go back up to it, you could really play pretty much any finger you want, but after you play this E, you want to change it to the fourth finger, just like so that you can head back down the scale some more. If you didn't do that, you wouldn't be able to go down the scale very easily. So on this C that we want to play next, we want to play our thumb on E, just like so. Then we want to play C with our second finger as we play 5 on A in the left hand. Again, you could play 3 there or 4 there, whatever you want to do, but the next note, you have to make sure that you change it to 4 once again. Just like so. We want to play B with our middle finger. I think I changed the fingering of this measure in the left hand a tiny bit, so I'll get to that in a second. Then we want to go down to B. And then we want to play C and A, just like so. Then we want to cross our middle finger over to F sharp. This is the next measure. And then play D in the left hand at the same time. Then we want to jump down to A with our second finger. Then we want to play that E and then go back up to that F sharp. Then we want to play 2 Ds together. And that is that lowest note of the piece. That's the only time we actually play that D in the entire piece. That's kind of fun. The next measure here is also pretty fun, because we want to jump back up to here with our pinky, which isn't really so much of a jump as it is more of a reach, but we want to jump with our left hand up here to F sharp with our third finger, and then play F sharp and D back and forth 2 times, like this, as we play this in the right hand, which is A and then down to D twice. So this is how this measure works. Just like that. The next measure has a really similar feel, but we want to move our pinky up to B and also play G in the left hand instead of F sharp. So a really similar musical feel and a really similar sound, except slightly different notes. From here, we want to play C with our fourth finger as we play F sharp in the left hand. From here, we want to go to 2 Ds. Whoops, my finger slipped off the note there. We want to play like that, and then we want to go up to D. We want to come back down to C. We want to then play G as we play B, like that. Then we want to play A in the right hand as we play D in the left hand. And that is that line. So let me play that through for you. So before we move on to the last line of the piece, which is really similar to the first line of the piece, and in fact it's pretty much identical except at the end of the measure there's no triplet. Before we move on to that line, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the second to last line because I changed some fingering in there, and I just wanted to show you guys what I did differently from what the sheet music says, because the sheet music fingering kind of wanted you to do some awkward things for no particular reason from what I could tell, so I made it a little bit easier to play and a little bit more natural feeling. Now if you want to play the fingering that's in the sheet music, even if it feels awkward, that's totally fine. And in fact, it probably would kind of help you in some ways to play some things that you normally don't play. But in this case, sometimes in sheet music, not so much in this piece, but in other pieces, sometimes the composer or the editor will have you do something rather strange with your fingers in order to set you up for something important in the next few measures. So for example, if you maybe had to play 5, 4, 5, 1, 4 in a certain measure because you had to go down the scale in the next one because of something that happened beforehand. If you had to do a certain strange fingering because of something else that's going to be happening in the sheet music, you should probably follow that strange and awkward fingering because of what's going to happen next. And if you don't follow that strange and awkward fingering, it could make the next upcoming measure be even more awkward and possibly not even possible to play. Sometimes that will happen in music. But in this case, the fingering was a little bit awkward for no particular reason, so I thought I'd change it. So let me show you what I changed. The first measure of the second to last line here starts off like this. I didn't change anything in the right hand, so I won't really be talking about that much at all. Instead, I'm just going to be focusing here on the left hand. So what I did was I played 4, 2, 1 in the left hand. And in this measure, there was no fingering written, so perhaps that is the correct way, or perhaps other editions would have you do 5, 3, 1. I really don't know, but I played 4, 2, 1 here. The next measure wants you to play 4 on C, so that's going from this. Then you want to play 4 on C, 3 on D, and then 1 on E, which I thought was a little bit strange to kind of scrunch your fingers up like that to play those notes when you really don't have to. So I played it like this, and I'm going to bring the right hand in here just to kind of give you an idea of how the whole thing sounds. See where my middle finger is? It's right there on that C, so I can just play C with my middle finger, and then play D with my second finger, and then play the E with my thumb because it's already sitting there. So those first two measures go like this. It's a lot more natural to play 3, 2, 1 than 4, 3, 1. So I just kind of liked that a bit more. Now perhaps the 4, 3, 1 would be a bit more natural if I played 5, 3, 1 here. But even still, because my fourth finger would kind of be there on C. But even still, 4, 3 is a 1 like that is a little bit strange. So I just thought it would be kind of convenient to change it to 3, 2, 1. Just like that. So the next measure, after you play the 3, 2, 1, the sheet music says to jump down to 5, and then do something rather strange. You wanted to play the next note, which is B, with your middle finger, and then play C with, I assume, your second finger. There's nothing written on that C. And then play this D with your thumb, so you can jump down to the low D. Just like that, not with that timing, but those are the notes you want to play. So what I did is, instead of doing 5, 3, 2, 1, the 5 to 3 thing was particularly strange. I just did 5, 4, 3, and then I skipped the second finger to play thumb on D, just like the sheet music says, and then jump down to the low D. So I thought that was a little bit more natural and a little bit easier to play. So let me play those first 4 measures of the second to last line there, just to give you an idea of how it sounds. Now again, I didn't change anything in the right hand. I only changed stuff in the left hand. The right hand fingering was fine for what I thought. So I just wanted to show you guys how I changed the sheet music, the fingering in the sheet music, just to kind of make it a little bit easier to play. Because sometimes it's totally fine to do that if you find that it's awkward, but there's nothing coming up in the sheet music that requires you to do that awkward fingering in order for something coming up. So now let me show you how the last line goes. Like I said, I'm just kind of gonna play it through nice and slow because we've already talked about it kind of twice already. In fact, we've definitely talked about it once, and some of the fingering and the note pattern in here is exactly the same as both the first and the second line. So let me just play this through for you. You recognize it? It's just at the beginning. This is just like the second line of the piece. Then here, instead of doing a triplet like this, we just do 2/8 notes. From here, we'd want to repeat back to the first beginning of that second section, which goes like this, if you remember correctly. It's where we were introduced to the D sharp, and from here you'd want to play it through to the end of the piece, and then you would end it at that part that goes like this. So that has been a tutorial of the Minuet. So that's how it goes. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the whole piece through nice and slow. I'm not going to do the repeats. I'm just going to play it just through, just so you can see how it goes. Again, no repeat. I'm going to move on to the second section here. So that is what the Minuet in G number 116 sounds like, played very slowly without the repeats. Again, I just wanted to, if I did the repeats, the piece would get really long at that tempo, so I just wanted to kind of skip the repeats. Again, don't forget to do them when you are playing the piece at kind of like the full speed or something. If you're just practicing on it, you don't really have to do the repeats, but it's actually kind of a good way to kind of divide the piece up into two parts, because as you notice, there was the first two lines, which are one part, and then the second three lines were like a different section, and they were also divided by the repeat signs. So you can kind of practice those first two lines of the piece until you get them really good, and then once you do that, you could move on to the next three lines and play those until you get them really good. Just kind of play them over and over again and get that feel, and then once you do that, you can combine them to play the whole piece. That's kind of one way I like to practice these pieces that have specific divides in the music. It's a really great way to practice. So hopefully you found playing that through rather helpful for you. So hopefully you enjoyed this video of the G major Minuet, which is number 116 by Johann Sebastian Bach. Now, I've noticed that a lot of you guys actually seem to be really enjoying these tutorial videos, the performance videos, the how to play videos, the videos on how to play scales, the major scales, minor scales, and other things related to music too, like key signatures and time signatures and how all that stuff works. So if this video helps you out and you might want to start learning this piece based on my video, let me know down in the comment section below, because I think it's really cool when you guys feel inspired by the videos I make. It's really, really awesome. Now, if you liked this video and you also found that it helped you, make sure to give the video a like, because that also helps out the video. And if you want to subscribe, make sure to do that. And if you do subscribe, make sure also to hit the notification bell to be informed of all of my future uploads, whether they're tutorials like this one that you might be into, or also if they are reviews of keyboard instruments, because I do lots of reviews on pianos, keyboards, organs, harpsichords, all kinds of cool keyboard instruments that I come across. I do reviews on them. So if that's your kind of thing, you might want to subscribe for that as well. And if you do subscribe, thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.